Okay guys, we're back and just about to move on to the next task, but before we do, did find the issue. It was a problem with my startup config as a modified version of the final config from Deep Dive Module 15, and specifically the problem with the SIP phones was that, let me just do a show run, pipe to section voice service. Under voice service VoIP and the subsection of SIP, when you're just copying and pasting, and of course I'll correct this for when you load them into INE routers or even if you just load them into your own rack, the order that which the configuration comes up. But the order that the configuration comes up, this voice service VoIP whole section, including the SIP subsection, is in the router earlier. In fact, let me just, for the sake of demonstration, show the whole run. So here's the voice service VoIP, and this SIP, and specifically the bind control and bind media, or bind all, which adds both of those, that comes before the voice register global, and more specifically voice register DN and pools, which create any dial peers. And it also comes before all of the rest of any of your dial peers. Well, here's the thing. If you do not have a VoIP dial peer, then the router's logic is, how can we bind the control of signaling if we don't have any VoIP dial peers? Now, you might think, well, just take it as a configuration. You take other things related to the signaling protocol but don't have any VoIP dial peers, and then just, apply it later whenever we do. Well, for some reason, the router doesn't like that. No matter how many times you put these commands in, and we saw this in the last deep dive module, it will not take those commands until you have a VoIP dial peer. So I had already put those in as I was copying and pasting the startup config. Then the VoIP dial peers were created with the voice register pools and DNs, and I had to go back and put this in. So essentially, the phones were being told by this command in their configuration files that all of the signaling for SIP should be coming from 177.1.254.3, but every time they tried to contact that, they didn't get a response from that IP address. They probably did get a response from the closest interface, which is the fast00.11 voice VLAN subinterface. Okay, so that was the problem. We'll go ahead and clear this back off and get going with our next task. 16.2, iOS voice translation rules and a form of globalization. We're actually going to do a lot more of that in the Module 20 Expert Internetworking with CUCM in CME. So, whoops, sorry for the scroll. We're told to ensure that all inbound calls from the PSTN reach their appropriate 4-digit extension. Provision a method for this that takes into account that not all extensions are registered yet and that there may be more dial peers created later. Essentially what this is saying, in a cryptic sort of way, that could be the way that your lab is worded, so it's the reason I did it, is that we cannot use a voice translation rule on an inbound dial peer because there could be more dial peers created later. So instead, we have to do it on an inbound voice port from the PSTN. Also ensure that for all outbound calls to the PSTN, the calling party number display reflects the following for the respective phone dialing. Calls to emergency, local, or national should be displayed, should display the branch 2 calling phone phone's DID number with the beginning geographic code. So for example, 020-703-3001 or 2 or 3003 or 4. Calls to international numbers should display the branch 2 calling phone's E164 number beginning with country code. So 31, the 0 is not there. If you want a little bit more explanation on that, probably go back and watch modules 10 and 11 talking more about dial plans. And then 20-703-3, and then the XXX DID 1000 series numbers that the branch 2 site owns. Okay. So let's switch over to our router, and we're going to drop into config T mode. And we're going to start and create voice translation rule 1. And we're going to say rule 1. We know from past that this right here, or maybe not, if you haven't watched some of the others, voice translation rule 1, this is actually rule set 1. It's a set of rules. And I didn't, let me just exit out here. It doesn't actually call it rule set, it just calls it rule 1. But if you do a debug voice translation, you will see that it actually refers to this as rule set 1, so as not to confuse you with rule 1, rule 2, and rule 3 that fall below translation rule 1, or actually translation rule set 1. Okay? And some rules, or some, I should say some laws with voice translation rules, we have to have a matching number and a translated number. And this, by the way, some people had talked about or mentioned over the break, actually one person did, that there was some voice clipping. Is everyone hearing me okay, or is there any voice clipping or breaks in the audio right now? Give me a comment or a check box if there is no breaks, and I don't know what else is there, an X for disagree if there's a problem with the voice at this point. Can everyone either give me a checkbox or an X? Okay, great. Sounds like at least a couple people are reporting back that the voice is fine right now. Now, occasionally I will pause or mute it to cough, so please disregard that. Okay, like just now. All right, so voice translation rule 1. We have to have a match number, and then we have to have a replacement pattern or translated number. These have to be delineated by a set of forward slashes. So a forward slash, then your match number, then a forward slash. Right now I have no match number. It's null. Then a space, and then a forward slash, and then your translated number and a forward slash. So if I did this right here, 2 forward slashes, space, 2 forward slashes, it would translate nothing to nothing, or really anything to anything. It wouldn't match anything explicitly, and anything that is not explicitly matched is forwarded, uninhibited, to the replacement pattern. Okay? If I did something like match, so forward slash, so nothing in there for the match pattern, space, forward slash 213 forward slash, then any amount of digits that came in as part of the match pattern, and whether it was calling or called, inbound or outbound, that would all depend on future things, where I apply this rule set. But for right now, whatever type number, whatever direction it is we're going to apply it to, anything that's matched will be automatically appended to the end of 213 uninhibited. Because all we're doing here is essentially saying add 213, because again, anything not explicitly matched will be forwarded in the position that it is currently in to the translated or replacement number. Now, if I did something different, like a regular expression, like dot, which indicates any one character or digit, and then plus, which is a regular expression that says any one or more of the previous character, which was a wildcard of anything. So this essentially means any amount of digits, any random format of the digits, and we're matching all of them explicitly. Another way to write this would be with an asterisk. That might be a little more intuitive to people's wildcard matching. Okay, so I could do forward slash dot anything space forward slash 213 forward slash. Now that would actually take any number and turn it into 213. It wouldn't be automatically uninhibited forwarded to the end because we did match it. And this is not like a pot style pair where you have to explicitly match the number. All you have to do is match it, and if you match it, then you are changing it. Okay, so that's a rule. Also, we can do tests. It's back out at executive mode. It's not in a config T, so we'll do test voice translation. And we have to say the rule set, so translation rule set 1, and then the number. So let's say 555-212-6789. We translate any number that we match into, because we did match the number, into 213. Now if I said the previous / space translated or replaced number as /213 / to end it, then I did my test. Now we see that the 555-212-6789 is translated to prefix 213 to the existing 555-212-6789. Okay? I can also do things like regular expressions. So I can say, well, actually, before I do this, let's match 555 and change it to 888. Now, if I don't put that ending /, then it doesn't know that the command is terminated or delineated properly, so I do have to have those. Now if I do my test on, let's leave it as it was, 555-212-6789, I note that it matches 555-212-6789 and it translates it into 888-212-6789. So it matched the 555 of the 10-digit 555-212-6789 and translated just that part. The rest of it was not matched. And you say, but this matches 555 only. No, this doesn't say only match 555. If we wanted to say only match 555, we would have to have a $, which is a regular expression indicating the end of the string. Now, when I test this, this won't match. It didn't match with any of the rules. So if I change it to just 5552, it still doesn't match with any of the rules. If I change it to just 555, now it matches and it's replaced with 888 because I put the $, saying the end of the string. What if I tested 323-555? That matches. 323-555 changes it to 323-888. Again, I only indicated the end of the string. So if I would have done that same test again with a 9 at the end, it wouldn't match. But as long as because the string matches 555, which could be anything 555, and then those 3 5s have to be the end of the string. I could have 323-555-212-555. It still ends with a 555, and only that will be changed. So now I have 323-555, which was left uninhibited, 212-888. Because remember up here I was just saying the last 3 5s in the string, then my terminator, those are the ones that are going to be replaced with 888. So if I only wanted to match 555 explicitly and only, I would need to change my rule from match 555 $, to match caret 555 $. Now, that won't match. So let's just go back to 323-555. That won't match. 555-212. That won't match. But 555 explicitly will match and be translated. So regular expressions such as caret and $, also such as dot, which actually is an irregular expression. Actually, no, that might be the asterisks. Some of them are Cisco specific. By the way, this is a implementation, but it's a Cisco tweaked implementation, and they take liberties. It's an implementation of the Unix GNU SED, SED, or serial editor. But it is a tweaked version. So do show run pipe to section voice translation. So here's what we have so far. Okay, so that was just kind of a beginning. Actually, let's do one other thing in terms of rules. Let's change this to show sets. So if I say match with caret, no, let's just do it without a caret to begin with. Let's say 555, 3. Let's actually be specific to what we're using here in voice today. 703, 3 ... Okay, that's the number I want to match. But when I translate it, I just want to translate it down to 4 digits. So 4 digits, I'll put it in as, well, what will I do? Can I do 3 ... Does that work? Nope, it doesn't like the dots at the end. Some things will take those, like a number expansion, and even translation rules, but not voice translation rules. So what I have to do is kind of say, hey, I just want to match this information, or maybe even just this information, these wildcards, and forward that on to the end. All right? Well, here's how we have to do it. We have those 3 dots. We need to set up, and we have that closing /. We need to set up parentheses, opening and closing parentheses around them, to say that's a set of numbers that we want to call to our translated number. So I could say call set number 1, which is done with the operator called \, and then the numeral of the number of the set, non-canonically speaking. So we don't start counting by 0, we start counting by 1. So \1 will call that set of digits. Well, wait a minute, I needed that 3. I can do one of two things. I can either move my parenthesis to the outside of the 3, or I can just specifically put that 3 in there as a digit, and then say \1, which the \1 calls the first set, and then end it with a /. Now the problem is, let's do our test. If I match 703, 3001, it didn't match with any of the rules. And the reason is these parentheses are special characters that have to be escaped. So iOS doesn't bark at you. It didn't say invalid input. It said that before, but not with the parentheses. I have to go back in and add backslashes to escape them. Backslashes in the matched number are escaping special characters. Backslashes in the translated number indicate sets from the match number that we want to append. Now if I do my match, now it will match 703, 3, anything, 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 so 703, 3, 001, and change it to 3 \1, so 3, and then the first set. Another way to do this is do debug voice translation. And now let's do this test. And we'll see that we have a successful substitution. Here was the pattern that was actually sent to the translation engine. Here was the match pattern as it was configured. Notice they don't have the backslashes or the /, but they're necessary to work. The replacement pattern as it was configured was 3 and then \1, and then the actual replaced pattern, and watch the word wrap, replaced pattern was 3001. So this debug voice translation can really be useful to you. Okay, so do show run pipe to section voice translation. Let's see what we have. This works just fine. However, it's pretty complex, and the only reason I did it was simply to show you of the power and complexity that voice translation rules can yield. And we did this along with a number of other things in, I believe it was Module 10, yeah, Module 10, and some others as well, when we were talking about SIP trunks to a SIP gateway to the PSTN, and doing globalization and the plus sign adding. So there's another module that goes into a number of other voice translation examples. But if you missed any of what we just went over in terms of rules and you're watching the recording, then stop and move the playhead back a little bit and rewatch that. But let's go on to actually our configuration for today. So rather than a little bit more complex rule like we have here, let's just scrap this and try to create a simple rule. Rule 1 / 703. And by the way, we don't, I guess, know what's coming in from the PSTN, so it probably might be good to do debug ISDN Q931 and just place a call in from the PSTN. Let's place a call in from a local number. Okay, we get busy tone because it's unallocated, because 703, the called party number, 703-3001, isn't configured. That's what we're about to do our voice translation rule for. But it comes in with 7 digits. And I already knew that, and that's what I was starting to configure, but just wanted to make sure you knew why I was doing it. So rule 1, 703. Now, what did we want to have left? 3001. Remember we said anything that we don't explicitly match will be appended to the end, as it was, unharmed, and anything that we explicitly match will be translated to whatever we explicitly translate it to. What if we just match 703 and translate it to nothing? Let's test that rule. Do test voice translation rule 703-3001. Hey, that does the same thing. It matches 703 and it translates it to nothing, gets rid of it, leaving just the 3001. So that should work just fine. So let's try our call in again. Oh, the only problem is we haven't applied it yet, of course. Okay, so now let's move on and jump back out and say voice translation profile. So we've got our translation rule and our translation profile, and we'll call this one, we will call it 7-digit DNIS called number to 4. So we're translating 7 digits down to 4. And we're going to translate, and here's where we can do called, calling, redirect called, or redirect target that I explained earlier in the slide and intro section. We're going to do translate called and rule set number 1. Then we're going to jump into our voice port, :15, because we were told there could be more dial peers in the future, so we don't want to do it on our generic inbound dial peer. And we're going to say translation profile, and it's going to be on the incoming direction, and it's going to be the name, 7-digit DNIS to 4. Now if we hit redial, the call should ring. Why? Well, I don't know. Let's check. Let's get rid of all of our screen and scroll back and do debug voice translation and do a redial from the PSTN in. And we could answer the call, but we'll go ahead and hang it up. And so we've got our ISDN debug in here. And here we see matched with rule 1 with rule set 1, successful substitution, the actual pattern, the configured match pattern, the replace pattern for the match pattern, which was nothing, and then the result, the effective replace pattern. Okay, so it goes actual pattern, configured match pattern, configured replace pattern, result of the actual replaced pattern. Okay, and that's what allowed it, plus the direct inward dial, to go ahead and ring extension 3001. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do undebug all and go ahead and do debug ISDN Q931. We still want to see that, but we don't want to see our voice translation rule. Voice translation debug all the time. Okay. I suppose it probably wouldn't be bad. Well, let's go ahead and leave it on. Do debug voice translation. Okay, let's clear our screen, and we're going to jump into voice translation. Don't make the mistake of just saying translation rule, because as I mentioned, there is a translation that's not as powerful. Voice translation rule set 2, rule 1 of rule set 2, is going to be that we took inbound down from 7 down to 4, but now we want to make sure that outbound calls have their appropriate calling number appended. So right now, if we just do call out to 112, we see that our calling party number is 3001. And we were told local numbers, emergency numbers, so 0703 7333. That still shows 4 digits. If we do national, 0010 704 7444, that still shows 4 digits. And 000, which by the way I looked up and there is no secondary dial tone for SIP, so I thought I remembered there was, but there isn't at this point. 000120. I waited too long talking for interdigit timeout. 0001206501 5111 hash. We see that we are also still sending out calling display of 3001. So for everything except for international, we want to send out 020 703 3001. And for international, we want to send out 3120 703 3001. Okay, so we're in voice translation rule 2. We're going to create rule 1 in rule set 2. And this is going to match only 3 ... $, so any 3000 series number, and it's going to translate it to 020 703, and we want to call everything that we matched up here. Now we could put this in parentheses, however, that's just a little bit more work, and aesthetically it's a little, little more to think about. I suppose you could say a little more confusing, but just a little more to mentally process every time you look at the configuration, especially if you're troubleshooting something that doesn't seem to be working. So there is 2 ways that we can actually call everything that was in the matched number, regardless of whether it's inside of a set or not. The 2 ways are the special operator of \0, which calls everything. We can do a test here. By the way, when I'm adding those rules, you can see that the debug engine is being triggered as well. I'm just looking back for my test command. There we go. Do test voice translation rule 2 3001. We see that it is 020 703 3001. Okay, so \0 is one way. Another way is with, I'm still on rule 1, I'm just overwriting it, is with the ampersand command. Wait for this to process, and now do our test again, and it also appends everything to the end. Okay, I like ampersand, it's a little cleaner. Sometimes it's actually hard to distinguish it from another character when you're looking quickly at do, show, run, pipe to begin, let's say voice translation. Sometimes it's a little hard to distinguish that ampersand. Some people might like \0. I prefer the ampersand. But 2 different ways to accomplish the same thing. Okay, so now we're going to put that into a voice translation profile, and we'll call this one 4-digit ANI, or calling, to 10, translate calling rule set 2, and then we need another one. So voice translation rule set number 3, rule 1 in rule set 3 will be / pretty much the same thing, /3 ... $, and we'll translate this one to 3120 703 ampersand, all of the rest. And to keep in good form, we'll test it. Do test rule number 3 for 3001, and we see that the successful substitution is there. The replaced pattern is, well, we can see it up here, 3120703 3001. So we will put this into a voice translation profile called 4-digit ANI to 12 digits. We could call it whatever we want. Translate calling for rule set 3. All right, so let's erase the screen, show run, pipe 2 begin with voice translation. Here's our rule 1 that's being translated call Dina 7 now down to 4. Rule set 2, which is translating calling 4-digit up to 10 ANI. Rule set 3, which is translating the same match number 4-digit up to 12 for rule set 3. And so we'll go down to our dial peers, and we'll jump back into config T and say for dial peer 1, we're going to do a translation profile in the outgoing direction for that was going to be 4-digit to 10, ANI to 10. Same thing for POTS dial peer 2, POTS dial peer 3, POTS dial peer 4, and then POTS dial peer 5, we're going to change that to the 12, the 4-digit ANI to 12. So notice the difference in the naming of our voice translation profiles. So we'll do a show run again. This time pull up our dial peers, write our router config. We can see the difference in our dial peers from before. Let's go ahead and test everything. So emergency services should show from 020, 0, and then 112 emergency services should still show that. Good. 0703 7333 to a local number should show the proper same number, same calling display. 00107047 7444 national or long distance. Again, we were told to show the same thing. And then for international will be the difference here. So 0001206501511 hash. And here we're showing country code 3120703 3001, just like we were instructed to do. So we've used voice translation rules to show different outbound calling depending on where the called number was. So different calling number display based on the dialed digits. Okay, and that was the sub-form of globalization that we had here, was the international none. We'll use the same thing when we're on Module 20 doing internetworking between the two if we want to deal with globalization to and from, globalization full, true globalization, true E164 with plus dialing that we went over in Module 10 and 11 extensively for CUCM, if we want to do that when we're networking with CUCM.